Hi, and welcome to a brand new video. In this video, we're going to be tackling the compare version numbers problem, where we're given two strings that represent version numbers, and we need to see whether or not they're the same. This isn't as easy as it sounds though, because as you can see here, these two are stated to be the same, but it may not appear so. That's because we need to remove any leading zeros in between the dots. Additionally, if this version number doesn't fully go out to the number of sections this version number has, then we need to assume that it's a 0, and 1.0.0 is the same as version 2, so we return 0. But if they're not the same, we just need to return which one's greater by putting 1 or -1. So in order to solve this problem, what we first need to do is kind of break up each version number at these dots. So after we do that, then we can remove the leading zeros in every single section. So as you can see here, we just get 1 and 1, and then we can compare each section with each other. In order to speed this up a bit, we can just do this all at once. So we can first remove the trailing, and then we can compare in the same loop iteration. But what if you have something like the second example here? Well, what we can do if you have 1.0 and then 1.0.0 is that we can still split it up at the dot here. But we can say, well, because this one has a length of 2 sections and this one has a length of 3 sections, we're going to iterate through the one that has a maximum. Because the one with the minimum, well, we'll just assume those later sections are just a bunch of point zeros. So once we iterate, we can say if it exists, then we remove the trailing 0. So if exists, and then otherwise, we're just going to set it equal to 0, and then we can compare. So let's go ahead and implement this solution. So inside the coding editor, the first step that you noticed that we did was split it up at those decimal places or those dots. So I'm going to just say string array1 is equal to version1 dot split by the dot. String array2 is also split by the dot. And then we're going to kind of implement the solution that we just had. So we're going to say for int I equals 0, I is less than, remember we said the maximum of the two lengths, so we didn't go with 2, we went with 3. So we're going to say math.max of array1.length and array2.length, and then we're going to do I++. We said that if it exists, we're going to remove the trailing zeros, otherwise we're just going to return 0. So we can just say int a, which is just going to be the first one, if it exists. So in order to check that, we just need to say, well, if I is greater than or equal to array1.length, it's going to be set equal to 0. Otherwise, we need to remove the trailing zeros. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, let's think a little bit more about your math class here. 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, they're all the same. So what we can do is that we can take this string and convert it into an integer, because in terms of integer, these three are the same and it's just going to equal 1. So I'm just going to say integer dot value of, and the value of is just going to be array1.I. And then I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. B to 2, perfect. And now we need to compare it. So if A is not equal to B, we just need to return which one's greater. So according to these rules, if version 1 is less than version 2, so if A is less than B, we return -1, otherwise we return 1. Now, we haven't really used this notation in the past, so I'm just going to quickly walk through it. So this is just like a mini if statement. So this first one is the condition. So that's the condition that you're going to put in your if statement, for example, in this if statement. The question mark separates the condition with the if, what happens if it's true, and the false. So this is basically a mini if else. This one's going to say that if this is true, set A equal to 0. If it's false, set this equal to A. So in this scenario, we're saying that if A is less than B, we're returning -1, otherwise we're returning 1. And then if this is true, return 0. You're going to notice that our code doesn't quite work, but let's just make sure that is the case. Yeah. So, well, first, we need to convert these into strings. But you're going to also notice something else doesn't work. We don't get the right answer. Let's try to print out these two arrays first in order to see why that might be the case. And sure enough, it is because these two arrays are empty. There is something tricky that Java does. It can't really recognize a string with just a dot. So you actually need to do two backslashes in order for it to recognize the dot. So that is something that you might see if you look at other solutions. And it is very critical here if you want to get the right answer. And if we return our code, you can see here that we were able to get an awesome working solution. So I hope this video was helpful and see you in the next video.